Close your eyes and imagine. What if the things in life that cause us the greatest pain, the things that bring us grief, are challenges? Challenges designed to help us grow, to ultimately become what we were always meant to be. We feel like we've been buried, but what if, like a seed, we've been planted? And having been planted, we grow to become a mighty tree. Now, open your eyes. Open your eyes to this way of viewing life. Come with me as we explore your true, infinite, eternal nature. This is Grief to Growth, and I am your host, Brian Smith. Hey everyone, this is Brian Smith back with another episode of Grief to Growth. And I've got with me today a new author. His name is David Ditchfield. And David had a near-death experience that is really amazing. But the really cool thing about David's near-death experience, the thing that I think makes it more interesting than some, is what happened, the after effects of his NDE. And we'll talk about those today. So let me just read David's introduction and then we'll get started with our conversation. David is an NDE-inspired artist, composer, and author. He wants to use his NDE to make a positive difference in people's lives. In 2006, David was dragged under a speeding train in a freak accident. And as the surgeons fought to save him, he had a profound NDE. When he woke up in the hospital, he required new, astonishing abilities. He found that he could paint dramatic paintings of what he had seen in the afterlife, far beyond any artistic ability he had before. David then discovered he could compose classical music, having never received any training in classical music. To this day, he says he cannot read or write a single note of musical notation, and yet his debut NDE-inspired symphony, which is called The Divine Light, was premiered at a sellout orchestra concert to a standing ovation. And David since then has composed further classical works, which have also been premiered at sellout concerts. And David has completed over 40 paintings. David currently lives in a converted riverside mill near Cambridge in the UK. I want to give David's website. We're going to talk about that also. It's shineonthestory.com. That's shineonthestory.com. And with that, I'd like to welcome David Ditchfield. David, welcome to Grief to Growth.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me on.
Good David, I'm really excited to get a chance to talk to you today. I was telling you before we got started, I got an email from your publicist about reading your book, and I get these, occasionally people want me to read their books and bring them on the show. And I thought, I'll read the book. It's another guy that had an NDE, but first of all, the book is really, really well written. I mean, I started reading the first part of it. I'm like, am I reading the right book? Because it reads like a novel. It's really well written. It draws you right into the story. So tell me about your experience and share as much as you or little as you like about, what happened to you.
Yeah, well, basically what happened to me was I was seeing a friend off at the rail station in Cambridgeshire. And I'd been staying at my sister's for a few days just to sort of chill out for a bit because my life had pretty much hit hard times. So my sister said, come and hang out up here. So I was there actually for a few weeks. And a friend of mine had just come up to visit from London, and she was going back on the train. So I was seeing her off, helped her onto the carriage with her bags, as it were, and gave her a hug and a kiss to say goodbye. And then the emergency door sort of thing, buzzer started going. And so she said, come on, you're going to have to get off. I said, yeah, don't worry, I'm cool. But as I stepped back, it wasn't cool because the bottom part of my coat, I was wearing like a sheepskin coat that day, just got caught in the doors and it was trapped. So I tried everything I could to release my coat, but it wasn't happening. So I turned around and looked for a guard and shouted for help, frantically. But no one turned up. There was no guard. In fact, there was only one other guy on the platform, and he said, take your jacket off, mate, But there was no way that was going to happen because the thickness of this coat was like pretty dense, and I knew it just wouldn't, in the time, it wouldn't happen. Mm-hmm. So I was banging the windows, trying the electric door buttons at the side, but nothing. And then I remember looking into the eyes of my friend, Anna, who I was seeing off, and the look of horror in her face was not surprising because we knew what was about to happen, that the train was just revving up the engines to leave. So it pulled out of the station and started pulling off pretty fast speed, and I lost my footing, and then I was dragged along the platform and then through the space between the platform edge and the actual than the train itself. And then I went through, and I was just pulled down, right down into into complete darkness and hell. It was just horrific. So I figured at that point that I was going to die. I didn't think there was no way I was going to survive this. I remember actually just seeing, like, I heard this tremendous rip at this point, and then I just looked up and I saw what looked like the carriage doors disappearing up into the sky, and I went down into this darkness. And I was tossed around like a rag doll, just like banged around from side to side, pillar to post, as it were,
Mhm.
And it felt like I'd been thrown into a spin dryer, sort of, or whatever, on full speed. Um, it was incredibly stressful and painful, but I never lost my conscience. I was fully conscious throughout the whole ordeal.
Mhm.
And then finally I hit the ground, and I was laid down between the tracks, and the train was still, at this point, was still racing above my head at tremendous speed.
So at this
And
point, you're underneath the train as it's passing over you. Is that
yeah,
correct?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
that's correct. Yeah.
Mhm.
So um, I figured, even though I'd been, released from everything, that it wasn't over yet. That I thought some undercarriage or whatever could just kind of whack me over the back of the head, and that would be it. So I just kept my head right down into the gravel. And I can remember the smell of the oil, and and it was just really intense. And then the sound of the train was rattling above over my head, and eventually it passed. It moved on, and I realised that I was alive. So it was incredibly beautiful to know that, but also I was in immense pain, and I looked to see what the damage was. And this once beautiful, rich, a sheepskin coat I talked of was now ripped to shreds, all from the arm down anyway. And
Mhm.
also, so was my arm. In fact, my arm had been cut off. The top half of it had been cut open and cut off. There was a lot of mess, and I was in a lot of pain. And
Mhm.
but the odd thing was, figured, right, I better get my cell phone out and call my sister and let her know what had happened, so she could alert the emergency services. And of course, that wasn't going to happen. The phone wasn't working, and people
Yeah.
that suddenly arrived anyhow, they were there really, really quick. And these guys jumped down onto the track, and the emergency services were there, and they cut my clothes open and got me onto a stretcher, and got me into hospital, pretty quick. And when I arrived in the hospital, there was like a big team of doctors and surgeons and nurses all there waiting, like in a big semicircle. I remember, as I looked, and I went straight into this bay, and then they were all running around frantically trying to save me. At this point, I was losing copious amounts of blood from the injuries, and um, my family arrived. My family arrived really quick, and so they came in to see me. And I remember my mother was in tears. She was going, and I was going, "Mom, I'm so sorry. It's always me messing up and causing all the dramas in the family." And of course, she said, "Don't apologize." So she was just glad I was alive. And and then I saw my friend Anna, and I wanted to speak to her. She was just sat at the back. I said, "Can I speak to Anna?" So she stepped forward, and we spoke. And I remember she was just shaking her head in complete disbelief that this had happened. And it was at that point that the pain got so immense that I left my body, and I left the whole sort of complete sort of overkill of noise and light in the hospital to this beautiful, dark, warm place. And I figured at first I was in a very small, darkened space, although it was a lovely darkened space.
Mhm.
And the first thing I noticed around me were like these kind of orbs that were like pulsating all around me, like these beautiful colors, like sort of oranges and ambers, yellows and blues, and just slowly pulsating. And I felt very calm just looking at these. And I thought, where am I? And the next thing I looked, and just I could feel this. Well, I could feel this a sense of somebody there with me. And
Mhm.
I looked at my feet, and right to the right hand of my feet, I could see this being of light. It was like a beautiful androgynous being, wearing like a simple black contemporary T-shirt. Nothing ethereal at all, just very
Hmm.
and. This androgynous being had this like sort of like um, skin that was radiating light from within, you know. So it was very luminous skin, and the hair was kind of like a white sort of blonde hair, I guess.
Hmm.
And the eyes were just staring at me. But when I say they were staring at me, they were kind of, there was a calmness, there was like a smile in their eyes,
Hmm.
and I felt the sense of protection, overwhelming sense of protection and love coming from this androgynous being. And but not only that, I felt like I'd known him or her for the whole of my life and beyond, you know. And so there was this real connection there,
Hmm.
like a soulmate, if you like I'd known this person really. And I lay my head back and I thought, this is it. I've died. This is the next stage where we go to. And I was quite happy with that. I had no sense of like sort of, oh, no, I'm dead. You know, it was like this, right? Okay, I'm dead. This is it. You know, that's cool.
Uh-huh.
As I laid back, I remember looking up and I could see like these three grids of white light suddenly started to come in towards me.
Hmm.
And this intense, pure white light, it was amazing. And it was just very, very bright. And I couldn't take my gaze away from the light, even though it was so bright. I mean, you know, if it had been electric light or even the sunlight itself, of course, I never would be able to look because it would be too piercing. But this, I just couldn't stop looking at, and because it felt like the energy that was coming from this light was healing me, and it was just beautiful. Um, and it was at that stage I suddenly thought I got two other. Well, I thought I got more presence within me in this space,
Hmm.
and I looked, and either side of me were these two beings, of female form. Um, one was sort of, I suppose, either Asian or American Indian in her look, and the other one was more sort of like white Caucasian and brown hair and brown eyes, and they were both hovering their hands over my body, and they were kind of like almost protecting me and giving me this energy that was like healing my soul, if you like. Because
Hmm.
as I looked down, I looked at my body to check out my wounds, which I knew had been pretty bad, and my arm was fine. It was reconnected. In fact, I got no clothes on other than being covered by this blue sort of like a beautiful silk cloth. You know, it was like a blanket of silk. It
Hmm.
was just keeping me cool and relaxed. And I looked, and so yeah, everything was intact. No, not even a bruise or a scratch. So my whole body was fine. But it's like they were healing everything, the trauma that had just happened to me, and they were just
Hmm.
like trying to ground me almost. And when I say ground, I suddenly realised that I was lying on this huge piece of slate. It was like a big sort of, almost like a medieval rock altar. You know, it was like very big, is the only way to describe it.
Hmm.
And normally you would think that that would be a very uncomfortable situation, lying on a piece of slate like that, but it wasn't. It
Hmm.
felt remarkably comfortable. And what I realized at this point as well, that the energy I was getting from all these beings and all this light was just pure unconditional love. It was just like this energy of love, you know, all the feelings of love you've ever had in your life, whether it's through your lover, your mother, your father, or even your pet dog or whatever. You know, it was all
Hmm.
encompassed into one, and it was just coming through, you know, the energy from these beings and the light itself. Then I suddenly start to think to myself, well, what about my family? You know, they're going to be down in the hospital. You know, they're already distressed enough to see what had just happened to me, and they're going to be like, you know, down there looking at me and completely mortified because I was dead.
Yeah.
So I looked over the side, but I didn't. It was odd because before that, my whole life was always filled with guilt. As I just said, I was apologizing to my mother for what had just happened, which was crazy. But I didn't feel any sense of, you know, oh my god, my family. It was just a sense of wanting to check on them. And I looked over the edge of this huge rock, thinking
Hmm.
that I would see them, but I didn't see them at all. But what I did see was this most remarkable sight. It was like a huge arc. It was like a waterfall of stars, if you like, a beautiful, massive waterfall. And these stars were just slowly cascading over the edge and dropping down into what seems like other galaxies, and
Mm.
well, into infinity. It just kind of went on and on and on, you know, and the colors that it was dropping down into were just like beautiful. And there was like shooting stars that just seemed to be just dropping through the middle, and I just thought, wow. Then I knew that, of course, I wasn't in a small darkened space at all. You know, I was actually in the universe itself, if you like, because that's when I looked around. There were millions of stars everywhere, um, and I just thought, wow, this is just like incredible. This is just amazing. You know, it was just it was a very euphoric feeling to be in this place. And as I slowly turned myself over, I thought to myself, well, okay, I can't see them, but I'm going to be seeing them all soon. They'll be, you know, we'll be fine. We'll all get over this. You know, I'll be seeing them up in this place, or if I don't, at least I know they're going to be enjoying this beautiful experience themselves. You know. Then as I turned over, I suddenly realized at that point that the level and intensity of love that I was experiencing, and suddenly it's like a dial had just turned up to tenfold, and I thought, what is going on now? And then I looked, and just ahead of me was this huge sort of tunnel of white light, a very intense tunnel of light, and it was just slowly edging in towards me. And this tunnel was like surrounded by like flames that were slowly rotating around, very powerful, and you know, oranges and yellows, all the colors you'd see within fire. But it wasn't like the kind of fire that you would normally feel fear of. You know, it
Right.
wasn't. There was no sense of danger. It was more like it was just powerful. You know, and I straight away I knew as I looked and felt this energy that was really my whole of my body was just, I could feel every molecule was vibrating from this energy. And I
Hmm.
thought, now this is God. This is the source of all creation. This is like where it all comes from. It's not it's not the vision of God that we tend to sort of all be given when we're all growing up, you know, like that you see on the ceiling of the Vatican Chapel, you know, with
Yeah.
the guy with the beard reaching out his hand. This is God. This is a huge energy of light.
Hmm.
So yeah, and I laid back, and I remember as I put my head back, I was kind of laughing and smiling to myself at all this beauty and knowledge. And it was at that point that I suddenly found myself crashing back down to earth, and I was back in my body,
Hmm.
in the the emergency department of the hospital, with the
S-
doctors flying around and the pain suddenly rushing straight up through every part of my body.
So during this time, when you're with these three beings, and then you see the light that you perceive as God, were there any words spoken telepathically or anything, or did you get any impressions, or did you know who
It's
these people were?
Yeah, there were no words spoken. I know that I've obviously read up now since, and some people do get words spoken to them,
Hmm.
but it was more, it was telepathy, really.
Hmm.
It was all coming through in forms of telepathy.
Hmm.
Um, and I felt that the initial being that was the most important one was the one that was stood at my feet. I felt that that being was my complete and pure and ultimate soulmate. You know, it was almost like a mirror of myself, because interestingly enough, when I was a child, I had very white blonde hair myself, which was odd because my dad had really jet black hair, you know, and my mum had very dark brown hair. And there
Hmm.
was always a joke, you know, when they used to take me through town, they were going, "You sure this is your son?" kind of thing, you know. And so it was almost like there was I don't know, there was this there was a a strong form connection. It was basically my higher conscience, if you like, my higher
Okay.
consciousness. So my
Yeah.
higher consciousness is what stood there at my feet and was protecting me. And I feel that that being is with me at all times now.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Any feeling like I want to stay here? Was there any discussion about you coming back, or you just found yourself back?
Well, I was quite happy to stay there. So there was no part of me was saying I want to go back. You know? You know, when I did come back, there was mixed feelings, because there was a sense of like, oh, hey, why have you sent me back? You know, I was quite happy there, but there was that only lasted for a short amount of time,
Hmm.
because ultimately I was so charged with what had just happened that I just couldn't wait to tell the world. And I figured that at that point, I'd never heard of near-death experiences. I never knew that this happened to people. And so I figured at that point, I was the only one that this had happened to.
Okay.
So I
Yeah.
figured, right, I didn't come back, with this kind of ego sort of sense of, right, I'm special. Don't get me wrong. But I just
Hmm.
figured, right, this has happened. Now, why have they sent me back? What is my mission? Right from the off, I thought, what am I supposed to do now? And I spent most of my time in hospital trying to figure that one out.
I'm gonna, Dave, if you don't mind, I'm gonna interrupt you for a second. I wanted to share some of your paintings, so people can get an idea of what we're talking about.
Great.
So let me share my screen here, and for people watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see these. So this is the scene that David talked about, and I think you did. It's amazing to me that you captured this, and you've got no artistic training, and you'd never painted before.
That's right. That's the very first one I did, actually, that you've got up at the moment.
So I think this does, so this is here the being, we got the being that you said is the kind of androgynous being with the white hair.
That's
and
it,
these are two women.
These are the two women there, yeah.
And the slab. I mean, I said I looked at your paintings and I'm like, I'm not an art critic, but they look pretty amazing to me. And this kind of depicts the scene at the accident. That's how your left arm was flayed. Yeah,
that's right. That's what I saw. I saw the inside of my whole arm, and rather than feeling horrified by what I saw, I was actually going, "Wow, that's the whole of the inside of my arm. And that's how it all works." I could see every single nerve ending and what have you. So I wanted to paint that. That was the second painting I did, but I also had to do that one because even though I'd had the near-death experience, which had obviously changed my life, I'm a human being, I'd just been thrown under a train, and I had to deal with that and process it. So that painting was also part of me processing what had happened in the actual accident.
Yeah, the trauma that you went through. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So that's
and while we're looking at your paintings, I did have a question for you because you don't mention in your NDE that you saw Jesus, but I see a painting here what is
that's right.
What is this painting?
Yeah, that is Christ I've done there. Yeah,
Okay.
And that came about because a little later on, I came across a spiritualist church in the town where I was staying, where I now live, and I wanted to go in there, and I went through the door and I went into like one of their services, and it was really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, one of them turned around and said, "Look, we don't normally say this, invite people along, but you look in a pretty bad way." And I got all this stuff holding my arm together at that point. And they said, "We do spiritual healing." I said, "Oh, great." So I started going for spiritual healing. And through some of those healers are also clairvoyant. And they would just give small messages at the end of the sessions sometimes, and they pick things up. And there was once I was in there having some healing. I'd see, you see the halo there in that's some of the images that I would see, images of light while I was being healed. But in one of the sessions, I saw Christ, and just like as I painted him there, just kind of hovering above me.
Wow.
And so I came to the end of that healing session, and the person who was healing me turned around and said, "Oh, do you know that Christ was with you?" When I saw Christ, and so she felt exactly the same, and it was just so remarkable that I had to go home and start painting that straight away. So that's where that.
And I want to share one more. This is I guess this is the tunnel that you saw, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just incredible work how you were, able to capture that. And I was telling you before we got started, I think one thing about NDEs, a lot of times people dismiss them as the hallucinations of a dying brain, or it's a dream that you had, or whatever. But what it's interesting when people have what I call, or what's called veridical NDEs, where, sometimes people can describe something that happened while they were supposedly dead. But there's also the after effect of NDEs. Some people come back with mediumistic abilities. Some people come back with enhanced abilities for intellectual or spiritual. They can see things. And you came back with this ability and desire, I guess, even to paint.
It was, yeah. Yeah, the desire was there right from the off. I remember my sister coming in to see me the very first night after I had the operation. I was in for about 8 hours, and then she came in the following night, I should say. And I was in a room, they'd given me a room to myself. I remember we were both chatting, and she said, "Look, is there anything I can get you?" And I said, yeah, can you get me like a small sketch pad and a pencil? She went, okay, so you're thinking, all right, and I remember I got the nurses to prop me up in the bed, and I did this very faint sketch of what you saw in that first painting, basically, because at that point I was really scared I was going to lose it and forget it all, because it was
Mm-hmm.
just so important. But of course I never have done. But so, but also I just figured, I was lying in that bed and I thought, I've got to paint a huge canvas. This has got to be something like a big Michelangelo sort of Renaissance painting,
Yeah.
it's got to be big. And so that was and that's exactly what I did. My aunt came over from Canada, I remember, to see me, and I was chatting about all about it, and she said, I'm going to buy you a canvas. And so she bought me the canvas, and yeah, in all fairness, I left it stood against the wall for a while, very nervous about starting it, because
Mm-hmm.
obviously I thought I could just make a real mess of this. But a friend of my sister's came along, and her and her husband ran this kind of a gym and yoga center, and they said,
Yeah.
look, we've got a studio space going. If you want to come up and use one of our rooms, then you can get started. She knew that I was putting it off, and I went, okay. So I got no choice but to start. And when I started, I couldn't believe it. It was just coming together, so beautifully for me, and I'd start to at the end of each day, I'd literally sit in a chair and look at my canvas, and I go, wow. And I knew at that point that I was being helped, that I knew the energy that from the other side that I'd been to was just giving me some knowledge of how to be able to translate what I'd seen onto a canvas. And
Mm-hmm.
and it went from there. And so I now connect, with everything I do. I'm very aware that I'm channeling ideas through, and so that connection stays with you.
Yeah.
So
The other thing I wanted to point out, because I said I was reading the book, it kind of reads like a novel, because we've got some foreshadowing here too. Before you even have the accident, you have an
yeah.
experience at a spiritualist church. So
We'll get back to grief to growth in just a few seconds. Did you know that Brian is an author and a life coach? If you're grieving or know someone who is grieving, his book, Grief to Growth, is a best-selling, easy-to-read book that might help you or someone you know. People work with Brian as a life coach to break through barriers and live their best lives. You can find out more about Brian and what he offers at www.grieftogrowth.com, www.grief2growth.com, or text growth, GROWTH, to 31996. If you'd like to support this podcast, visit www.patreon.com/grief2growth, www.patreon.com/GRIEF2GROWTH to make a financial contribution. And now, back to Grief to Growth.
tell me about that.
Yeah, well, that was just kind of like, you might call um, a fluke or synchronicity, as
Mm-hmm.
I'd put it, really, because I was coming. It was in the same town. I was coming up a couple of months before the accident to visit my sister one weekend,
Mm-hmm.
and I was on the train, and I was sat there, and there was an elderly couple sat opposite me, and the lady turned around asking me where the next station was or what have you, and then she turned around and said, we're going to see a medium tonight. And I was going, okay. And I really wasn't interested in engaging in conversation at that point, but she was quite keen to carry on that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
She said, very good. She really is and stuff. I said, okay. And then as we got off the train, she handed me the flyer, the little A5 poster or what have you. And I put it in my pocket and forgot all about it. And when I turned up to my sister's, there was a lot going on there. She was sorting out the kids and stuff. So I said, look, I'm just going to go and have a drink. So I went to the local bar, had a drink, and then I thought, I'm going to go. So I went to this medium platform, as we call it here. And it was like in this spiritualist church, and it was packed. It was absolutely packed. And people were going there looking for messages. They'd just lost their loved ones. And messages were coming through. She was brilliant. She really was great. I thought, wow, that's amazing. But I wasn't looking for anything at that point at all. But she turned around and said, man in the blue sweater over there, your life's about to change. And I went, oh, okay. And I said, in what way? And then she walked around. She was going like this. And then she said, they're not telling me. They're not telling me. They just said, be ready for it. It's going to be big. Just be ready for it. And I said, fine, great. And I figured, right, I'm going to win the lottery, or I'm going to get the girlfriend that I
Yeah.
was hoping for. I was chasing
Yeah.
all the the material things that I wanted out of life. But obviously that they never came, all those things. And my life was spiraling downhill. But now I realize, looking back, that what that message was coming from the medium was basically that I was going to go under a train. I was going to have a near-death experience, and that was going to change my life. That was the big change that she was talking about, or they were talking about, I should say. So so that was my first venture into spirituality. Before that, it hadn't even entered my mind. Really, faith or religion hadn't really sort of been a part of my life at all. So.
Yeah, it's interesting, Dave. These little things that people do, like this woman handing you a flyer, which you on a whim go to a spiritualist church, which kind of gives you the heads up a little bit this is coming. So, and then the way you found the studio where you started painting. That was kind of as you said, that was another synchronicity. You run in these people that just happen to have a studio, and you get the paint, you start painting. So how did you get into the music? I mean, so you've got the ability to paint, and now you start composing classical music.
Yeah, well, before I used to play guitar, like just basic 3 chords sort of punk rock and roll stuff, and but I couldn't play guitar anymore because of my left arm accident injury, and so but. What happened was I was through one of these healing sessions. Well, 1 or 2 of them actually. A couple of the healers kept saying to me each week, "Oh, why am I picking up a violin laid across your chest?" I was going, "I have no idea." Then one of them said, "You're going to write a piece of music about your experience." That's what they're telling me, and I was going, "Great." So I went home and I pulled out this. I had this old cheap synthesizer, in the back of the cupboard or whatever. And I pulled that out and started playing around on that. And these chords came through, and I figured at that point I would be writing, a piece of music. I thought he meant like a three-minute song,
Yeah.
And I was trying to get the song together, and interestingly enough, it just wasn't coming as that at all. I thought this is sounding more like it could be played by an orchestra or something. It was sounding more like that, and I started building on that and getting it together. And by that point, at the place I was doing the paintings, I'd met a girl who played cello in the local orchestra who was coming up and looking at my paintings. People used to come in to the centre and used to come up. They were fascinated by what was going on. And she was one of them. And she said, "Can we use one of your paintings for a poster for our next concert?" I said, "Yeah, sure, it would be brilliant." And she said, "What are you up to?" We used to meet for coffee. And I said, "Look, I'm just writing this piece of music, and it feels like it could be played by an orchestra." And I got no intention of trying to push it at all. She said, "Oh, maybe we could play it." And I was going, "Okay, I'm going to hold you to that kind of thing in my mind." So I just developed it and got the first movement together. And my brother at this point turned around to me and he said, "Look, I've got this, it's like an app or what have you, that you can use on your laptop. And when you play your keyboard, the notes that you're playing on the keyboard, it will, then transform it into notation." So that's what I did. And so I started hearing all different instruments coming through, like horns and flutes. And then I recognized that had to be a French horn, for example, or a piccolo. And then I just got it to sort of transport all these parts. And then I spoke to this girl again from the orchestra. I said, "Look, I've actually got some score. Would you look at it?" And she said, "Yeah." So she brought one of the other guys along from the orchestra, and we had a meeting. And they looked at the score. They went quiet for some time, and they said, "Yeah, we'll do it." So they offered to perform it, and then it was great because they said to me, "Look, do you mind just chatting to the local press, because we always do something there to promote the concert?" I said, "Sure." So once I started talking to the local press and told them what the story was, because the piece was actually about my near-death experience, and everyone knew about the accident locally because it had been all over the news, this guy gone under a train and what have you. So they were going, "This is great," And then the phone just kept ringing, and other people started wanting to interview me, and then the BBC wanted to do like a piece on me. So the concert consequently sold out 2 weeks in advance, which was fantastic, for me, but also for the orchestra as well. So it was a brilliant vibe between us all. The energy was felt just great, and so the concert. I remember they'd given me and my family the front row, and I was just sat there, and I just enjoyed it because it was great. having to be stood on the stage holding a guitar, hoping for the best. I was actually sat there watching it being performed, and it just sounded amazing. It just sounded how I'd heard it when I was playing this little synthesizer in my
David,
kitchen.
I have to say, I took piano lessons for 11 years. I've had music theory. I wouldn't even know how to begin to write a symphony. You've got all these different instruments. You've got different sections of the orchestra. It's such an impressive feat that you did this. Even with, I saw that you said you got the app from your brother, so you were able to plink it out in your synthesizer and it converted to notes. But you've got to know piccolo versus the flute and violins and cellos and all these different things and how to bring them together. And then you actually had vocals in the last movement, if I remember correctly.
That's right. Yeah. That was I wanted to get somebody to sing the last part because I thought it would be really lovely just to have a voice, sort of talking about what it's about. And so I approached this guy. I knew he was like one of the best. He ran a choral society, and he was like one of the best tenor singers in the area. So I phoned him up. I said, "Look, can I come around and see you?" And he said, "Yeah." And I took the score round, and I said, "Look, I'm looking for someone to sing it. Could you recommend anybody?" And he looked at it. He said, "This is great." He said, and he was saying stuff that I didn't know about theory. He was going, "How did you manage to think of putting like a minor seventh over
That's what I'm saying,
flat or whatever?" And I was going, "I don't know." He said, "Well, that's great because you wouldn't normally do that, but it works."
Right.
And then he said, I'll sing it myself." And I was going, "Really? Oh, fantastic!" And you probably heard he's got a really beautiful, pure voice, and so that was it. So he just turned up at the rehearsal, did one run through, and it was there. There was one or two bits where I'd written it wrong in terms of but not hardly anything at all, and that was it. So one rehearsal, and we were off. So and he actually turned around. He was interviewed by the BBC afterwards because they knew who he was, and he turned around and said, "Well, I wanted to do this because I knew all about David's accident," and he said, "I was just so impressed how he could just step out of his comfort zone and produce something like this." He said, "I wouldn't even begin to start composing a piece myself," and that's what he told me. And I thought, that's mad. You've got so much knowledge.
Right.
I'd have thought you had been writing them all the time. I think he said, "I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't attempt it." So, but again, I was channeling ideas through. I knew they were coming through from somewhere, and by that stage, I would just stop. And as I do now, when ideas come through, I literally stop and I look up and I go, thank you so much, because it's just, that acknowledgement is important, I feel. So, yeah.
There was a point in your book when you met with Joy at the spiritual church, one of the healers, and that's when I think you kind of got a lesson about unconditional love.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, basically, I realized through my near-death experience, and she helped me to sort of, we talked about it and understand it even more, what had happened to me. And that was before my near-death experience. I'd got no sense of self-love. And so my life was completely going wrong all the time. I'd left school without any qualifications. So I was struggling to get by. And I just never fitted in at all. So rather than stop and give myself any self-love or self-worth, I just kept beating myself up. So that's why it was all going wrong. So she helped me to understand that. She knew that when she was healing me, she could feel that still, that, that I'd suffered a lot of pain throughout my life, and that self-love was the most important lesson for us all to learn, and unconditional love as well. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I just realized this. The names of the people in your book, are they their real names, Joy and Irene?
Yeah, I mean, one or two of them have changed. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
I'm just curious because it's interesting. Her name is Joy, and then Irene, your psychiatrist, her name means peace. So I don't know if you knew that or not. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, I thought Irene was really interesting too, and I love the story with Irene. Because she doesn't really believe that you had this experience, right? She's just kind of humoring you. So
well,
I love
this. She's humoring me. Yeah, come on, carry on, please.
I love the story when she talks to you about the card reader, the guy, the tarot reader that she had met.
The what? Sorry.
The tarot reader, the card reader that she had met, that told her about.
Yeah.
So tell us about that, because I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Well, basically, I wanted to sort of track down the the medium who I'd seen, a couple of months before, and it took me ages to find it because I kept describing it to the people in the church.
Hmm.
I said she's got dark hair. And I go, no, 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 And then she turned up one Sunday, and there she was, but she dyed her hair blonde, so that's why nobody knew who I was talking about.
Hmm.
So I went up and talked to her afterwards and said, look, I don't know if you remember, but and she hadn't recalled it at all, But I said what had happened, that she'd given me this message, and then I told her what happened. So she said, I do tarot card readings. I said, yeah, I know. I said, could I get one off you then? And she said, yeah, I want to give you one for free. I'm not charging you. And so she gave me this amazing tarot card reading, and it was really brilliant. But in terms of Irene, it's like I could tell. I mean, I totally respect anyone coming from the scientific point of view,
Hmm.
most
Sure.
certainly, because I needed that, and we all need it, And without them, I wouldn't be here now talking to you. But I couldn't every time I brought up spirituality or talked about things like this, I could see that she was kind of like getting almost a bit nervously, like, yeah, let's move on. But I
Hmm.
thought, no, this is part of my life. I can't just move on, And so I could tell that she knew that, and that as part of her was like, almost like, I wasn't trying to convert her or anything like that, but
Right. Right.
I knew that ultimately that there was just, you know, she respected that what I was talking about was had happened, but she just couldn't turn around and say it. So,
What I thought was really interesting about it, and I like I said, I think her that mentality is really important in this world. We need to be skeptical. I think it's good to be
mm,
skeptical. And as I said, as I'm reading your story, I'm like, okay, what am I seeing here? Okay, so I see, first of all, you come back with the ability to paint, ability to write symphonies. You were drinking quite a bit before this, and you
that's
stopped
right.
drinking. You really kind of turned your life around. So as you know, I'm thinking of her, put myself in her place as she's watching you go through this, and she tells you the story about she had seen a tarot reader, and I guess he predicted she was going to make a career change, which she ended up making, and then she still says, well, maybe that was a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I thought that story that you told in the book was really interesting, about how she actually had evidence that someone had given her this prediction, which came true, but she just kind of dismissed it, which I think we can tend to do.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess I thought that was an interesting part of the book. You had just
Oh,
really
thanks.
great,
Yeah.
character interplays that you have as you're going through this experience that you went through. So after you've gone through this, how has your life changed? I mean, you were told by the medium you're going to have this big life change. So, in what ways has your life changed?
Um. Well, as I say before, I got no real faith in anything. I hadn't got any faith in myself either, and I guess I was just everything that was going wrong in my life. I was looking for the quick fix, i.e., as you just pointed out there from the book. I was drinking heavily,
Hmm.
and that eventually was starting to consume me. I mean, there was I was picking up mainly sort of manual labouring work, and that kind of work, you had to go to the local bar. Basically, that was like the office. That you go in there to hustle work, after the guys and say, "What's going, what's happening?" So
Hmm.
you ended up hustling for work. You get the job, and then you're just there the next day, and you're just drinking your wages away. So it's this vicious circle, and eventually I spiraled into complete, a non-entity. And but the thing is, I was just, as I say, I was beating myself up. I was never attacking anyone else. I never let my own anxieties out on others. It was always me that I was beating myself up with. But um, after the NDE, it was completely opposite. I'd learned self-love, and that self-love gave me this completely different outlook on life. I'd learned to love everything that was around me. I learned to appreciate nature. I learned to paint. I learned to sort of create music, and suddenly my whole life now feels like three-dimensional compared to before, where it was just this one dimension. And when I look back, basically all I was doing was just, it was linear. I was just going along the surface and trying to fill the cracks. Whereas now it's kind of, it's not all great all the time. Obviously, that's impossible. But
Yeah.
I ride into when I take the dips, I go with it. I learned that I've got to go with that, and that I will come out again. And I just, and I just know that my guides are there, and I never feel like they've left me, even when things go wrong, you know. So yeah, so it's just more three-dimensional and a lot more fulfilling, you know. And
Yeah.
yeah.
That kind of leads me into the next question I was going to ask you was, what do you think your experience can teach all of us about life? And I think you just kind of answer at least one of those things, is that we go through these ups and downs, but we're going to be okay. We're never really alone.
Yeah. Say that again, sorry.
I was going to, you were saying that, as you're going through these ups and downs, I think you've realized now that we're never really alone. You feel like,
Oh
you've
yeah,
you've
yeah,
got these,
sure.
and we all have these guides that you have. We all have that comfort and that love that we sometimes
Yeah,
might not feel.
totally. Yeah, yeah. This is something that I'm really keen to sort of press to everyone that whoever I speak to, just around me or whatever, and that is that
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to have a traumatic accident like me or an NDE to be in touch with your guides. We've all got them, and we can all call upon them basically, and it's nothing too difficult, and it shouldn't be something that's made difficult. I think that when I look at a lot of the faith and the way we've been brought up, a lot of us have been felt that if you're going to actually if you're going to pray, for example, then you're in a position where you're feeling like, oh, I'm asking for this help, I hope you don't mind. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, when I ask, I'm humble, but only in the sense that I'm humble, showing respect, like as if the same kind of respect I'd be humble with anybody who was helping me,
Mm-hmm.
on the earth plane or whatever you call it. I'd be humble, but I don't kind of go in with this kind of feeling like I'm a sinner, that I've sinned, that I've got to feel a sense of urgency and guilt. Just be clear and ask your guides for any help, even if it's something small, even if you're just nervous about, something that's going on that day. Just say, can you help me please with this one? This is tricky for me, and they will come. They will come and help you.
Yeah. So you do believe in the power of prayer now, and
Yeah.
so prayer. Tell me more about that. How does prayer work?
Right. Well, I discovered that pretty much straight away, because after the train had moved on from that point in the accident, my friend Anna was frantically trying to find somebody to stop the train, and then she bumped into like a ticket collector, and he ran forward and stopped it. She said it was just sat in the middle of nowhere on this carriage, and there was like this emptiness,
Mm-hmm.
and she said there was just not emptiness, so quietness, not emptiness, and they were just out there in the middle of nowhere. And she said she turned around to this very busy carriage full of commuters and said, "Could we say a prayer, please, for my friend who's just died? He's just gone under the train," because she didn't think I would have survived it.
Yeah.
And then she said, a woman stepped forward and said, "Look, I'm a Christian. Would you like me to take the prayers?" And she said, "Please." And so she said, this woman just took these prayers. And she said, it was amazing just seeing everyone close their laptops, put their newspapers down, and everyone prayed for me. And I felt that energy coming from them. And also my mother told me that various churches in the small sort of villages surrounding where we lived and that were all praying. And I knew it because I could feel it all throughout those early days in the hospital of when I was in agony. I could feel this energy of prayer. So I firmly believe that prayer does work. So,
Mm-hmm.
if anybody turns around to me now and says, "Look, a friend of mine, her son, whatever, is in hospital." There was that happened over Christmas, actually. It
Mm-hmm.
was a friend of a friend. So I said, "Look, her son's really ill in hospital." She was trying to get everyone to come together, and pray for him. So I said, yeah. And we all did. We all sang out all these prayers. And I worked really hard at praying for this boy that I'd never met before. And I just looked at his photograph online and just visualized him. And you know what? He came through it. He came through the other side. And he was like in a coma. And it was like, it works. It does work, So there's so much more out there. The way the energy of the universe works is just so incredible, And we just don't all. We're not all educated in ourselves, or not educated. That's the wrong word. But, we don't have that instinct to know that, and it's very hard to try and understand it. But it is quite simply what happens. If we believe and trust in the universe, it will help us all.
Yeah, I think what you said there is actually very true. I think it's very important. I think we do have that instinct, but we're kind of educated out of it. We're told that we're separate individual beings, and there is nothing out there. There is no connection to the other side. And I think that's why a lot of us feel so lonely and unempowered, you know. So when
Yeah.
someone goes through like what you go through, you've tapped into that other side, and you seem to keep that connection even as you're back here now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just been part of my life every single day since. And, you know, going back to, you know, scientists who, or what have you, or skeptics on near-death experiences, is that the way I look at it is that if it had been a hallucination or a dream or what have you, I would have forgotten all about it by now. You know what I mean? And it wouldn't have been that important to me just to still be talking about it, and it wouldn't have changed my life the way it changed. And you know, dream state as well. When the dreams are generally chaotic and you know, lack form, whereas like a near-death experience it's real, and it's very sort of intensely consistent, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like you know that you're there. Okay, it's a different dimension. It doesn't feel like you and I are sat here talking now,
Mm-hmm.
but it was as clear as you and I are talking now. It was just and every other people that I've spoken to since who've had NDEs agree with that. You know, there's this common thing as well, that when you talk to other people, yes, everyone's differ. You know, everyone's got a different story with their near-death experiences, but there's so many similarities. You know, we've
Yeah.
come off air or whatever, and we've been chatting. I've been interviewed by a few people who've had NDEs, and then we chat afterwards, and they go, "Oh, how did you feel when you were in the hospital, when you came through after the operation?" And I talk about it, and she's going, "Yeah, me too. I had that energy that, you know, I just couldn't wait to tell the world all the same things." And you know, so it's a very consistency uh, that's going on there between us all. Yeah, yeah.
Well, you know, there's some, you know, there's the stereotypical, I guess, you know, the tunnel of light, the life review, the meeting of loved ones, but all these things don't occur in all NDEs,
Yeah.
but they're very common. But the one thing that is common and across all NDEs is unconditional love. The
Yeah,
lesson of unconditional love, and the unconditional love that's usually felt on the other side. And people
yeah,
that see an entity that they describe as God or source or creator, there's usually light associated with it, and it's just an overwhelming feeling of love or of being at home. I mean, those are the things that are just kind of at the root of the NDE. But
mm,
as I was telling you before we went on air, the thing about your NDE that to me is undeniable is the life changes that you experience afterwards. People don't have life changes after having an hallucination. They don't have life. They don't get suddenly get abilities that were lying dormant. You know, that now I can paint and I can, you know, write symphonies. Um, those things don't happen when people just, you know, go into a coma or something.
yeah, yeah. Um, I mean, generally speaking, I mean, people who've had NDEs, they don't all come back and paint or write music, but a lot of them do change where they want to talk about it, and they end up getting on platforms and
Yeah.
you know, talking about it at conferences and things like that. And you know, there are scientists who's, you know, Dr. Eben Alexander's, you know, one of the classic ones, with the biggest seller. You know, he was like a neurosurgeon, and you know, so he should be a skeptic, if you like, but he's not. So he's obviously, that's why he's a big seller. But he, you know, it's changed his life in as much as he's gone from just being that to also wanting to go out there and talk about it
Hmm.
to the world. So you know, it affects many of us in many different ways. I mean, there are some people who've had near-death experiences who've got in touch with me, but they've kind of kept quiet about it. I mean, I remember meeting a guy in the hospital, because when I was recovering, we used to go into like this, like a gym, and everyone in there, they're all amputees. They'd all, you know, had horrific accidents and stuff. So they were trying to help us all back.
Mm.
And this guy had come off a motorbike. You know, he'd been chased by the police, and he was going along the highway and came off at 125 miles an hour.
Mm.
And again, shouldn't have survived, but he did.
Mm.
And I'd gone in there, and I'd told them we used to have coffee at the end of each session, and I told them the story when I was having the coffee one day, and that was like the first group of strangers that I told, and they were so captive, and everyone was asking me questions, and everyone was really tuned into it and thought it was amazing. And then I just kind of remember going away thinking that it felt great, you know, that everyone wanted to know rather than dismissing it. And I just sat down on my own, and this guy came over to me. I'd come off the bike, and he said, "Mate," he said, that story you just told. I said, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah, that happened to me.
Mm.
Same thing." I was going, really? I said, right. I said, have you told anyone? And he went, no way. He said, I said, why not? He said, no, everyone would just think I was crazy. I said, no, don't. You've got to talk about it, And I've never seen him since, but I kind of get the feeling that he probably wouldn't have done, and which is sad because it's like he'd been given a second chance, an opportunity to sort of, well, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't know, but it didn't feel like I was convincing him to actually open up to his mates about it. So I wonder how many people are out there who've had near-death experiences and haven't really, or not acted upon it, if you like. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there are those people, and it's interesting as life has changed and as become more common, and we're learning about it. People are kind of coming out of the closet, and talking about it. And I saw that Dr. Moody actually wrote the foreword for your book. Raymond Moody, who coined the term near-death experience in the late '70s. So, but still, as you said, even when you had your experience, which was it 2006?
Yeah, that's right.
You hadn't heard the term. It's still not known by a lot of people, and the circles I read in, it's like we accept it as just common.
Yeah.
But most people don't realize how common the near-death experience really is. But thanks to people like you who are, going out and writing books and being willing to be open about it, people are starting to understand.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, for me, I just want to try and sort of get the message out there to as many people as possible about it. It's just it's been my quest right from the off, and also to tell people not, to try and to tell people not to fear death, basically.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I was interviewed by somebody who contacted me from the Guardian newspaper, which is like over here, it's quite a big paper, and she was doing a short series of films all about her fear of death. And so she came up from London and spent some time with me, and she was genuinely very scared of dying, to the point that, she would go to sleep nearly every night worried about it, and I was just, so I tried my best to sort of like tell my story and try and help her through it and stuff. And I've realized since that the people have got in touch with me and are now, since I've been doing more interviews and stuff, and genuinely fear death. Well, not only that, they've just lost somebody. They've lost a loved one, and they're looking for that hope that their loved ones are safe. So it's lovely to be able to talk about my story, and then I've had people say that's really helped me because I've just lost a loved one, and it's great to know that there is an afterlife and that they're being cared for, because it's really important for us all to know that, because I feel that we don't really talk about death enough. I'm not saying we should get up every morning, chat about it over our coffee, but it's a taboo subject in the Western world, and it has been since medieval times, when there was a lot of people dying at that point. So that's how it was talked about a lot more. So it's something that I feel that we should all just just chat about with people like myself or people like you, and just debate it for a short amount of time, if you like. It doesn't have to be, and just so that people know that it's going to happen to us all eventually, or we're going to all start losing loved ones around us in our families.
Mm-hmm.
It's just to know that there's that. It's okay, it's all right. I mean, I lost my mother last summer, and of course,
sorry.
I went through it. Thank you. I went through the physical, loss of my mother and stuff that brought me into the world, but I instantly knew where she'd gone, and it was so reassuring for me to have that first-hand knowledge. It felt great to know that she was receiving all that beautiful love on the other side that I'd had.
Yeah.
But it would be great just to be able to just say to everybody, that's it. Please don't fear what's happened to you, your loved ones, because they're being cared for in a much better way than a lot of us are down here.
Yeah. So David, what is your life like now? What are you doing? Are you painting? Are you selling your paintings, or
Yeah, well, I've written a book, so, and as you pointed out, so there's been a lot of time spent really
Mm-hmm.
putting the promotion together for that, because
I'm
I
sure.
want to try and get the energy out there to as many people as possible. But I'm also writing a new piece of music as well, for orchestra, because I've written quite a few since that one, and got commissions. So this one, which is entitled "I Wasn't Expecting This," and that's a new piece for orchestra. So that's coming together really well. That's again, there's a lot of divine energy coming into that for me, and so
That's awesome.
yeah,
That's really awesome. I'm really great. So, how about your painting? You're still painting?
yeah, I still paint. Yeah,
Okay.
and yeah, I just finished off a painting for somebody who commissioned me to write to do a painting for her company. She does like a it's I was invited out to the south of France last summer to talk to a group of people who are on a retreat, and all these people, well, they're all women actually, and they're all end of life doulas. They're like sort of soul
Mm-hmm.
midwives, and
Mm-hmm.
I'd never heard of them before, so that was a new one to me. And it was great. So they asked me to go out there and talk about my experience. And when I was out there, the person who was running this retreat, called Holly, runs her own sort of funeral directors company. But the way her funeral directing is done is really beautiful. Where they wash the body and care for it and send it off to the other side. So anyway, so she asked me to paint a new logo for her. So that's the last piece of work I've just done, and that was really
Awesome.
enjoyable and beautiful doing it, because I felt so moved by all the work she does,
Mm-hmm.
and because it was just great seeing that she's treating death in the same kind of way that I'm talking about. That she's helping the soul to move on, basically,
Yeah.
which is great, because for
Well,
years and years, go on.
yeah. The death doula thing is really great, and I think we are starting in the West to accept death as just a transition, which is what you're telling us today. It's not an end. It's the next phase of life, I think, is the way a lot of people are putting it.
Yeah,
So I'm
absolutely.
really glad to see you, putting yourself out there and telling your story and being part of that. And I want to encourage people to get the book. It's as I said, it's a fantastic book. It's a great read. So it's called "Shine On: The Remarkable Story of How I Fell Under a Moving Train, Journey to the Afterlife, and the Astonishing Proof I brought back with me." It's by David Ditchfield. It's Ditchfield. And David's website is shineonthestory.com. And I previewed some of the paintings there. If you're listening to this and you're not watching it on YouTube, you can watch the YouTube video, or you can go to David's website and see some of the paintings there that are really, truly amazing.
Thank you.
So, David, it's been really great having you on and getting to meet you. Like I said, I really enjoyed the book. So I'm encouraging people again, to get the book and to follow you.
Thank you so much. I
Follow your
really
work.
appreciate it. Yeah.
So I appreciate what you're doing for the world, for letting us, feel more comfortable about the transitions you said we're all going to face.
Yeah. Oh, no, thanks a lot. That's beautiful that you just said about my work, by the way, just saying. I'm very humbled. That's great. Thank you.
Well, like I said, I think
Pleasure.
it's clear evidence to me of what you experienced. And I think and I'm glad you're sharing it with the world, because for people that are even skeptics, if you're a skeptic, get the book, read the book, look at David's website, and you explain to me how he got these abilities if something really crazy didn't happen.
Great. Thanks.
Well, David, you enjoy the rest of your day. It's been great meeting you.
You too. Oh, it's great meeting you as well. Lovely chatting as well.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye now.
That's it for another episode of Grief to Growth. I sure hope you got something out of it. Please stay in contact with me by reaching out at www.grieftogrowth.com. That's growth2growth.com. Or you can text the word growth to 31996. That's simply text growth, GROWTH, to 31996. Since you're watching this on YouTube, please make sure you're subscribed. So hit the subscribe button and then hit the little bell here, and it'll notify you when I have new content. Always, please share the information if you enjoy it. That helps me to get more views and to get the message out to more people. Thanks a lot, and have a wonderful day.